I see a lot of this of where people are like, oh, they're a narcissist, and that person is a narcissist, and that person is a narcissist. And truly, sometimes we have to take responsibility and accountability for our own. Today, I'm going to talk all about how social media is blowing up with the use of the word narcissism. Now, there are certain ways that there is narcissism in the world, like narcissistic personality disorder, and then there are narcissistic behaviors. And I'm going to break all that down so you can understand what really is narcissism, what is narcissism not, and when do you have to take accountability for your own actions and not blame it on someone else? That's the big thing. So I see a lot of narcissism out there, the use of the word, and it is because someone doesn't really want to take responsibility for how someone makes them feel. And I want to tell you that how you feel is your responsibility. Now, yeah, there are people out there that have real asshole-ish behaviors, but still the way that you feel is the way that you feel. Narcissism truly has to be diagnosed by a mental health provider. And so just because we believe that person may have those traits, and there are a lot of ways that we can look at the traits, it doesn't necessarily mean that that person is narcissistic. So let's kill the buzz and let's talk about what is narcissism and what it is not. So I'm going to read to you the DSM-5 diagnostic criteria for narcissism. So there is this grandiose or large thoughts of a self-importance, like you're the shit. You think that you're the best thing that's out there, which isn't always a bad trait, but when it's coupled with other things becomes very problematic. A person with narcissistic personality disorder also becomes fixated on this fantasy of this great importance, infinite success, that they're so brilliant or beautiful, or people just are after them. So that is and not after them in a paranoid kind of way, but that it goes back to that grandiose feeling of themselves that everyone's in love with them. They just feel like they're misunderstood by other people because they just don't see how great they are. They need this desire. They have a desire for all of this admiration. They really want people to love and dote on them. They have a sense of entitlement. And this is where those other traits added with these last couple will then really distinguish the difference between having some sort of confidence and narcissism. And I'll talk later on about the difference between confidence and narcissism, because I think that's also important. So the sense of entitlement is that things are owed to you just because you're so great. That's a trait of narcissism. They want to oppress other people. So they think that in order for them to maintain this high stature, then they have to make others conform to who they are. They really seek control over people. They make people believe that they're the best thing, and without them, that those other people are really in trouble. And so they really seek to push others down in order to push themselves up. Also, then they have no empathy for other people. And what that really means is most of us can be very confident and outward with our confidence, but yet we take into consideration of other people's feelings and how they might receive us. But someone who doesn't have empathy just needs to get their needs met without the care or concern of how it affects another person. I used this analogy earlier with a client. It's like I'm on the freeway on a high-speed chase and you're in my passenger seat. I have no care or concern for you. I just need to get my needs met, and that's to get away from the cops. And so that's where we can look at what empathy looks like. It is an inability to see someone else's story. It doesn't mean that we have to cater to their story or fulfill their story in some way. We just have to be understanding that they do have a story, and it doesn't necessarily have to match with our story. Another trait is that they have resentment for other people. They have a really hard time with criticism, and they think that other people also resent them. And they have these like egotistical, conceited type behaviors that goes back to that original criteria of just thinking that they're the best thing. So when you think about confidence and you think about narcissism, you can feel good about who you are and the skills that you portray, maybe even your own beauty, your looks, your career, your status in the world. You can feel good about those things. But the problem becomes when you're stepping on other people's toes in order to get there. And that's where the narcissism really starts crossing over and has become this overarching word in the social media world and online world. And it's filtered everywhere. It comes into my private practice. I see it all the time. And it isn't with clients who come in with narcissism, because again, remember, they're too great. They're not going to seek therapy. They're going to tell their significant other, family members, or people around them that they're the problem and they need to get help. So typically in therapy, when I see someone, it's because I'm seeing their family members. I'm not seeing the narcissist themselves. So you ask yourself, like, how does this have meaning in the world? How does this have relevancy outside of mental health? And it does because of social media. If we think about social media, there is this whole world of narcissism out there in social media because we're all competing for admiration. We're competing for numbers. We want to be that number one creator, and we create all these falsehoods of perfection that we are the number one. We're the ish when it comes to our platform. And that's where we're starting to breed some narcissistic type behaviors in the social media. And the younger crowd, they're really not getting it because they only know social media. So for us old cats out here where we've had life before social media, we really get that it is a lot of tooting your own horn going on out there. But when you have a business, or when you're looking to be an influencer, or you are an influencer, you kind of have to follow the train, right? You have to follow what's going on online. And it is that breeding of narcissism. Or narcissism. We are teaching our young people that their self-image, their self-esteem is housed on these platforms. So we are teaching our young people that your own self-esteem doesn't matter. How I internally feel doesn't matter unless I get the likes, the subscribes, the comments, the follows, the shares. I'm nothing to my own devices if I don't get those things. So our young people are really being taught that in order to feel good about yourself, others also have to feel good about you. And then this narcissistic type of behavior starts coming in because we get sensitive to criticism. Because criticism then means that we're losing followers, or we're losing likes, or then when we're getting monetized, it means we're losing money, and no one wants to lose money. So you think about when we get out there on social media, people tend to bully a lot because you're behind the computer screen. You're, those, what do they call, keyboard warriors, where they're out there targeting people and demeaning people because they don't have nothing better to do in their own lives. And I'll probably get some here, but I'm open for it because I understand how it works out there on social media, and I live a life outside of this place. And so my self-worth comes from me and not out there. But this is what I want to teach young people, is that our self-worth is created within us. It isn't created outside of us and depending on our likes. There's been a lot of recent studies that really show the increase of narcissistic traits in young people who really are that influencer status. And you think about the influencers that you might watch. We watch them because they're entertaining. We watch them because they're outside of the box. We watch them because they have something either fun to say or intuitive to say to us. And in order for them to make the money they do as an influencer, we have to continue to like them. And so I don't know if you've ever had influencers that's kind of flipped the script and changed up a little bit, and they lose followers, they lose their people. And that's because those people were riding with them to be who they were, but maybe they had discovered something about themselves that they wanted to change, or that they didn't like that social media was pulling out of them, and they changed. And because of that, they lost a lot of following. But when you're true to yourself, being able to do that really takes a lot of confidence. So let's talk about what is true self-esteem and what is not self-esteem at all. So on social media, this influencer status, that is an act. So we're actresses and actors online. I too am that person. However, most of the time I pretty much, you see what you get. If you get it here, you're going to get it if you see me in person, because I've learned that if I'm going to be of that stature, you have to know who I am inside and outside. So whether I'm here or you're in an office with me, or you're in therapy with me, or you see me in Walmart, because I do shop at Walmart, that's what you're going to get. So the self-esteem comes from knowing who I am internally and that you don't make a difference. So whether on this video I get 10,000 views or 1 view, it doesn't change who I believe that I am and that I have a message to give to people. And for those of us that are on social media, we have a message to deliver to our people. And that's why we do what we're doing, because that is what our heart is driving us to do. And so when we reflect on our heart's desire, our mind's desire, our soul's desire, and less on the likes, now we're working and operating within our true self-esteem, because I'm doing this irregardless of what happens when it gets dropped. So with that being said, let's talk about a lot of the narcissism we see in social media and everywhere, right? I want to get into how we see it in Hollywood. And this is where it really started. So when we look at how narcissism started in the public eye, it really started on the TV screen. I don't know about radio. I have not researched that. I'll just tell you straight up. I didn't go back to radio because radio was really in my time, but I already had a television, so I really didn't care about the radio. So think about how the influencer status. They're habitually posting. They have this extravagant wear, like everything is designer brands, and that's how we get our status. Been there, done that. Vacations, the cars, the houses, the lies about how your life is so much better than other people. And I've been that person. I've been there. I've done that. And it did breed a lot of unhealthy behaviors within myself. And then I see it out there online because I thought I was at this status where I had the house, the cars, the vacations, the lifestyle that I could post walking on the beach. It gives you an idea that maybe you're better than other people, your class is higher than other people, and that you begin to believe that people beneath you might not be as important. And that was not very healthy for me, and it's not very healthy for anyone, because oftentimes, especially in my practice, I see people of all economical statuses, locations, education. I see a wide range of people. And I have to appreciate people of all kinds. Even on this platform, I have to appreciate people of all walks of life. And when we don't do that, then we get to be in that behavior and we begin to justify our thought processes. We justify the extravagance. We justify who we want to become because we're envisioning this higher self. And that'll probably be another video of how we envision all this stuff. And so think about how just trying to be confident in what you're doing can easily go sideways when you start looking at your place in life and making a comparison to other people's places in lives. And so when you think about confidence, it is individual. It is about me. It has nothing to do with how anyone else thinks or believes or how they move. So I don't care what kind of house they have, what kind of car they have, what they think about me. Anything of that nature doesn't really matter. And what really matters is how I feel about myself. And so when you think about narcissistic people, they really take on a different trait where it becomes about everyone else and how can those people serve my needs. And this is where I want you to kind of begin to understand is that when you are confident, it is about you serving your needs without stepping on other people's toes. When it's narcissism, it is you stepping on other people's toes to get what you need, even if that is manipulative. And that is where we can blend in the true diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder and the narcissism we see online, because I want you to see where narcissism is being really blown up and how people are talking about it, which is very different than the personality disorder itself. The traits are there and people are just flailing around the word, but to actually have this diagnosis, it has to be given by a mental health provider so that treatment can be provided to that person. However, what I often see with people who have narcissism, even the traits, they don't show up in therapy. As I mentioned earlier, it is because they think they're so great and the world is the problem. So if the world just saw how great I was, I don't have to do any more work. The world needs to change to accommodate me. And that's where narcissism becomes a true problem, because it then gets out there and it seeps into our young people. And our young people are not learning the difference between confidence and narcissism. So let's talk about some famous people. I always like to talk about famous people so you get a relation and an understanding of what the diagnosis looks like in real people. And who better than to go after famous folks? And I might get some bad press off of this. And these people have not been diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. They're traits that they demonstrate that we see on television or in the public eye demonstrate narcissism. And that is where they've gotten that label. So mind you, this is not a mental health disorder given to these people. It is their traits that they've demonstrated in public that people then have said, this is what narcissism looks like. So, in the good old movie Mommy Dearest, if you're old enough to know about that, then you know Joan Crawford. It was a depiction of who she was as a mother, and the story was created by her daughter who experienced her mother's narcissism growing up. And so, this movie really depicts how a narcissist can be very loving and yet very demising to whomever is in their life. So if you cross them, you'll know that you've crossed them because you will have a problem on your hands. They will tear you to shreds. A narcissistic person is never a person to argue with because you aren't going to win an argument. They're very good at what they do, and they really seek out to be the person who is right. They collapse any time that they have criticism. And so their best way out of the criticism is to manipulate you to make you believe that you are the problem. So another person, and this is where the press might get a little wonky, and there's a gamut of things going on with this person. And I'm not here to give him this diagnosis, but Kanye West. And in particular, the behavior that he demonstrated several years ago when the music awards were on, and he went up when Taylor Swift won the music award that they were competing for, and he had to take over the mic and tear her down on stage and say he was the most deserving of this award, and like the awards Academy got it wrong, right? That is like your ultimate inability to take criticism and lose. Like he lost and he couldn't lose. And this comes out in so many ways. Another person that really kind of demonstrates this behavior is Donald Trump, where you can fact check so many things this person has said, and a lot of the things, if it's self-serving, are incorrect. A lot of his facts are incorrect. And he has a very hard time taking criticism, if he can take criticism at all. And he's been in the media a lot in terms of discussion about narcissistic personality disorder. Again, he shows the traits. I don't know about the disorder. And the last person I'm going to mention today is Jim Jones. If you know, you know, Jonestown. This man really believed that he was God, not a disciple of God or someone sent from God, but that he was God to his people. And he even admitted that he had no awareness or care of how other people felt about who he was. And so that shows you that this overt need for importance, the idea that no one is better than you and that you're at this highest place, believing you're God, can't get really any higher, and that you get your needs met even when it harms other people because you have no awareness that they have a story or feelings. That is really where narcissism kind of hits the road. And again, we can go off of the traits as much as we want. We ought to be careful with using this terminology with people because it can be very damaging and hurtful for people, especially when it isn't warranted to give to them. And so I want to talk lastly about that. Is I see a lot of this of where people are like, oh, they're a narcissist, and that person is a narcissist, and that person is a narcissist. And truly, sometimes we have to take responsibility and accountability for our own selves and who we are, our thought processes. So in a relationship, in a conversation, there are always two people. And in a conversation, there are always two people. And just remember, everyone has a perspective, everyone has a right to speak, and everyone has a right to that perspective. So, with that being said, just because someone speaks about something that triggers you, and that's another word that's thrown around a lot, is trigger. If it's something that sets you off, That's something for you to address, even if they're narcissistic. You have to take responsibility and accountability for how you personally feel about something. And so, if a person does demonstrate narcissistic patterns, behaviors, the one thing that you can do is monitor your contact with them. Maybe you don't have contact, or you have minimal contact with them. You have very surface level conversations with them. You don't get into arguments with them, and you don't talk about things that may bring up something that's deep rooted for them. It is hard to be in a relationship with a person with narcissistic tendencies, because it always feels like you're giving more than you're receiving. That won't ever change. And you never feel like you're truly secure in that relationship, or that you have a right to your own opinion. So those relationships should be and can be reduced or minimized to like the smallest degree you can tolerate that person. Because it's very hard to have a relationship with a person like that. And even though, so this is where that contradiction comes in. You can take responsibility for your behaviors and for who you are, how you engage in a conversation, but you also have to have a balance when you're talking with a person who has narcissism, because they want you to take all the responsibility for the relationship, how it crumbled, and what's going wrong in the relationship. And therefore, you have to really understand what is your contribution to the relationship and what is your responsibility. There are many relationships out there in which I've even been part of. I was raised by people who I believe have these tendencies. And it's not an easy one. And I had to learn what was my responsibility in the relationship, and when do they get to take responsibility for their own behavior. And I get to deal with however they respond to me. And so with narcissists, they tend to have very steep consequences. So if you act out and protect yourself, they will tend to then have a very steep consequence for you. They may hold back in the relationship. They may cut off the relationship. They may then badmouth you to other people and talk about how you're crazy or hard to deal with, or you're just not the person to be around because she's so intolerable, or thinks her shit doesn't stink. I've gotten that one. So you have to realize what is you and what is not you, and what do you want to actually tolerate from this person. And if you don't want to tolerate, you don't have to tolerate people. You can cut people out of your life, even if they're your family. I'll get on that topic another day. So with all of this kind of coming together, know what is narcissism. It is someone that thinks they're the shit, that thinks you think they should think they're the shit, and they can't take criticisms. They want you to admire them, and when a problem arises, it's all your fault. And that's all I have today for this episode. But if you are dealing with a narcissist, I would love to hear it in the comments. And if there are ways or information you would like to know about narcissism that I can bring out in a further video, I would love to hear from you. Until then, be well, and I will talk to you soon.